I meant to contact a planet, but two lustful alien women showed up at my door, signal in the void. The lab hummed with electricity as Dr. Elian Mercer adjusted the final settings on the quantum pulse transmitter. 3 years of research, countless grant applications, and sleepless nights had culminated in this moment. The device before him, an array of crystalline nodes and pulsing circuits, was designed to send a simple greeting across 23 light-years to Kepler 186f, the most promising exoplanet in the habitable zone. "Recording signal," Elian murmured, his voice echoing in the empty university laboratory. "This is Earth calling Kepler 186f, a peaceful greeting from humanity." Simple, direct, unlikely to be misinterpreted, assuming anyone was listening. His colleagues had laughed when he'd proposed the experiment. "Radio astronomy is one thing, Elian," Department Chair Winters had said, "but actually expecting a response? Pure fantasy." The transmitter whirred to life, converting his message into quantum-encrypted pulses that would theoretically bypass the limitations of light speed, a theory that would likely remain unproven in his lifetime. Elian sighed, running fingers through his dark, unkempt hair. At 32, he was already being labeled as brilliant but eccentric, too focused on improbable communication attempts rather than practical research. He watched the transmission indicator pulse 3 times before shutting down. "And now we wait 23 years, he muttered, powering down the equipment, if anyone's even there. 3 hours later, Elian was stirring pasta in his modest apartment when a low vibration shook the building. He dismissed it as a passing truck until the lights flickered and a strange humming sound emanated from his balcony. Drawing back the curtain, he saw a shimmering distortion in the air like heat waves on summer asphalt, but concentrated and intensifying. "What the hell?" he whispered, stepping back as the distortion expanded. The air seemed to fold inward, creating a pocket of void that swirled with iridescent light. Elian reached for his phone to record the phenomenon when 2 figures materialized through the rippling portal. The spatial anomaly closed behind them with a soft pop, leaving 2 women standing on his balcony, both staring at him with expressions of equal curiosity. They appeared mostly human, with striking differences. The taller one had skin with a subtle purple undertone that seemed to shimmer in the apartment's light. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, with irises that shifted between violet and indigo. Her companion was more petite, with pale blue skin that glowed faintly, and hair that moved as if underwater despite the still air. "You are Elian?" the purple-skinned woman asked, her voice carrying a melodic quality that seemed to resonate inside his mind rather than travel through air. "How do you know my name?" he managed, gripping the kitchen counter for support. The blue-skinned woman stepped forward, holding up a small device that projected his transmission in the air between them. "We received your signal. I am Vexia and this is Nylara. We represent the celestial commune of Kepler, but—" "That's impossible," Elian stammered. "The signal would take 23 years to reach you." Nylara, the purple-skinned woman, smiled. "Your quantum theory was correct, Dr. Mercer. The entanglement properties allowed instant communication. Your signal created a temporary bridge between our worlds." She gestured to the device on her wrist. "We merely expanded it to allow physical transport. You understood my research?" Elian's scientific mind began to override his shock. "But how did you interpret Earth language?" "We've been monitoring your broadcasts for decades," Vexia explained, her eyes scanning his apartment with evident curiosity. "We understand many of your languages and customs." Nylara moved closer, studying him with intense interest. "We volunteered as envoys when your signal was detected. The commune has long debated making contact with Earth. And you just appeared on my balcony?" Elian felt dizzy with the implications. "Your specific quantum signature guided us to you," Vexia said, touching a potted plant with fascination. "You are our anchor to this world." Elian noticed they were dressed in form-fitting garments that seemed woven from material that shifted colors with their movements. Both were undeniably beautiful in an otherworldly way that made his heart race. "How long do you plan to stay?" he asked, trying to maintain scientific detachment despite his growing awareness of their alluring presence. Nylara and Vexia exchanged glances before Nylara answered, "That depends on many factors, including your willingness to host us. Our transport capabilities are limited. We may need to remain until the next celestial alignment." "And when is that?" Elian asked, already calculating the logistical challenges of hiding 2 aliens in his apartment. "In your Earth measurement," Vexia replied with a gentle smile, Approximately 3 months. Elian sank into a chair, mind racing with equal parts scientific exhilaration and panic. 3 months, he repeated. With 2 alien women in my apartment. Is that problematic? Nylara asked, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that made him flush. No, he said, surprising himself with the truth in his answer. Not problematic, just unexpected. The timer on his stove beeped, jolting him back to reality. I made pasta. Are you hungry? Can you even eat Earth food? We've studied your biology extensively, Vexia said, approaching the stove with interest. We've been adapted to survive here. Food would be a wonderful first experience. As Elian awkwardly set 3 places at his small dining table, he couldn't help but wonder what other experiences awaited him in the coming months. The universe had just become infinitely more complex and infinitely more interesting. Strange new worlds. The morning sunlight filtered through Elian's apartment blinds, casting golden stripes across Nylara's purple-tinted skin as she sat cross-legged on his living room floor, eyes closed in what she called harmonic meditation. Nearby, Vexia was examining his bookshelf with intense fascination, her delicate fingers tracing the spines of physics textbooks and astronomy journals. 2 weeks had passed since their unexpected arrival, and Elian's life had transformed into a surreal experiment in interspecies cohabitation. He had called in sick to the university for the first week, using the time to help his visitors acclimate to Earth while processing his own shock. Your written language contains so many contradictions, Vexia noted, pulling down a quantum mechanics textbook, yet the mathematical principles remained consistent across dimensions. Elian smiled, setting down coffee mugs on the kitchen counter. I'd be fascinated to learn about your mathematical systems. Perhaps I could show you, Vexia replied, her blue-tinged lips curving upward as she approached. She took the mug he offered, their fingers brushing momentarily. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through him that had nothing to do with the hot beverage. Nylara opened her eyes, the violet irises seeming to pulse slightly. Your planet's energetic field is quite dense, she observed, unfolding her long legs and standing with fluid grace. It makes meditation more intense. She moved toward them, and Elian was again struck by her ethereal beauty. While Vexia had an intellectual intensity that resonated with his scientific mind, Nylara possessed a sensual awareness that made his pulse quicken whenever she entered his personal space. You seem tense today, Elian, she remarked, accepting the 3rd coffee mug. Is something troubling you? I'm returning to work tomorrow, he admitted. I can't avoid it any longer without raising suspicions. You're concerned about leaving us alone, Vexia surmised. Among other things. He ran a hand through his hair. And there's the larger question of what happens when people inevitably discover your existence. The world isn't exactly prepared for confirmation of intelligent alien life. Nylara sipped her coffee thoughtfully. On our world, new discoveries are celebrated, not feared. Earth is complicated, Elian explained. Some would welcome you. Others would see you as threats. Many would want to study you, and not necessarily with your consent. A momentary shadow crossed Vexia's face. We understood the risks. The commune debated for years whether direct contact was wise. Then why come? Elian asked the question that had been nagging him. Nylara moved closer, her eyes searching his. Because understanding requires more than observation. It requires experience. Her hand touched his arm gently. We wanted to experience your world, not just study it from afar. There was something in her tone that suggested she meant more than scientific curiosity, and Elian felt his mouth go dry. The apartment suddenly seemed much smaller. I should shower before dinner, he said abruptly, needing distance to clear his head. Later that evening, after a meal where he'd taught them to make simple pasta, which they'd found delightfully tactile, Elian found himself sitting on the balcony with Vexia, while Nylara explored his music collection inside. Your stars look different from here, Vexia said softly, gazing upward. But still beautiful. Do you miss home? Elian asked. She considered this. We don't experience missing the way you seem to. Our connection to our world remains regardless of distance, but that sounds peaceful. Perhaps, but it also means we never fully experience the novelty of separation. She turned to face him. Your emotions are so vibrant, so immediate. It's fascinating. Is that why you're studying us? For our emotions? Vexia's expression grew more serious. Partly. Our species evolved differently. We prioritized cognitive development and communal harmony. But something was lost in the process. What? Passion, came Nylara's voice as she stepped onto the balcony, the word hanging in the air between them. The intensity that drives your kind to create art, to explore, to connect deeply with specific individuals rather than the collective. She sat beside Elian, closer than Vexia, her thigh barely touching his. The contact sent a jolt through him that was becoming familiar yet no less potent. In our world, partnerships are arranged for genetic optimization and social harmony, Vexia explained. The concept of romantic love is understood academically but rarely experienced. That sounds clinical, Elian managed, acutely aware of Nylara's proximity. It is efficient, Vexia conceded, but perhaps incomplete. We came to understand what our evolution has denied us, Nylara added, her eyes reflecting the city lights below. And you, Elian Mercer, with your passionate pursuit of connection across the stars, make an ideal teacher. Elian swallowed hard, suddenly understanding the underlying current that had been building these past weeks. I'm not sure I'm qualified to teach anyone about relationships, he admitted. My history isn't exactly stellar. Perhaps, Nylara said, her hand coming to rest lightly on his. We might learn together. The night air seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. Tomorrow would bring complications, returning to work, maintaining their secret, navigating this increasingly complex situation. But tonight, under Earth's stars, Elian found himself caught between two worlds and two extraordinary women who were redefining his understanding of connection. Cultural exchange. The university laboratory felt strangely mundane after weeks of alien encounter at home. Elian adjusted his microscope, trying to focus on the quantum resonance patterns before him while his mind kept drifting back to his apartment, where Nylara and Vexia were supposedly studying Earth media via his streaming services. Earth to Mercer, came a voice startling him from his thoughts. Dr. Sophia Chen, his research partner, was eyeing him with amused suspicion. You've been staring at the same slide for 10 minutes. Either you found something revolutionary or your brain is elsewhere. Sorry, he muttered, straightening. Just distracted. By what? You've been acting strange since your illness. She used air quotes, clearly skeptical about his week-long absence. Did something happen? If she only knew. Just personal matters. Sophia raised an eyebrow but mercifully dropped the subject, returning to her workstation. Elian exhaled slowly, checking his phone for the 15th time that hour. The aliens had promised to contact him only in emergencies, but his imagination conjured countless scenarios, from them accidentally exposing themselves to a delivery person to setting the apartment on fire while experimenting with the microwave. By the time he arrived home that evening, he was a bundle of nerves. The sound of laughter from inside his apartment stopped him at the door. Female laughter, but not just Nylara and Vexia. He burst inside to find the alien sitting on his couch with his neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, a retired English teacher who occasionally brought him baked goods. The three were sharing tea and what appeared to be homemade cookies. Elian, Mrs. Delaney beamed. Your cousins are absolutely delightful. Why didn't you tell me you had family visiting from Europe? He stood frozen, processing the scene. Both aliens were dressed in his oversized sweaters and jeans, looking surprisingly Earth-normal except for their unusual coloring, which they had apparently explained away. My condition is called argyria, Vexia was explaining pleasantly. A rare skin discoloration from silver exposure. Nylara has a different genetic condition. Fascinating. Mrs. Delaney nodded sympathetically. And you both study advanced physics like Elian? Such a brilliant family. Elian managed a weak smile, joining them awkwardly. I see you've all gotten acquainted. They were struggling with your temperamental oven, Mrs. Delaney explained. I heard the smoke alarm from across the hall. After Mrs. Delaney finally departed with promises to bring her special international visitors more homemade treats, Elian collapsed into a chair. You can't just, he started. She was very informative about Earth social customs, Nylara interrupted, looking pleased, and surprisingly accepting of our differences. Humans are quite adaptable, Vexia added. They see what makes sense to them. She interpreted our physical anomalies through her existing framework of rare medical conditions. Elian sighed. You were lucky. Others might not be so easily convinced. His expression softened, but I am impressed with your quick thinking. Nylara moved to perch on the arm of his chair, closer than strictly necessary. We've been studying your language patterns and social behaviors. Your entertainment programs are particularly educational. I'm afraid most TV isn't an accurate representation of real life, he warned. We've noticed certain inconsistencies. Vexia agreed, sitting on his coffee table to face him, particularly regarding human courtship rituals. Elian felt heat rise to his face. What exactly have you been watching? Various romantic narratives, Nylara said, her fingers lightly touching his shoulder. They suggest physical contact plays a significant role in human bonding. It, can, he admitted, acutely aware of her touch. Yet your behavior suggests hesitance, Vexia observed clinically. Despite physiological indicators of interest, you can tell? He asked, then immediately regretted the question. Your pupil dilation, increased heart rate, and subtle skin temperature changes are quite evident, Nylara confirmed, her hand still resting on his shoulder. Our species has heightened sensory perception. Wonderful, Elian muttered, embarrassed at being so transparent. We find it endearing, Vexia assured him, leaning forward slightly. Your emotional responses are fascinating to observe. I'm glad I'm such an interesting laboratory specimen, he said dryly. Nylara's expression softened. You misunderstand. We don't see you as an experiment, Elian. Then what am I to you? He asked, finally voicing the question that had been building for weeks. The two aliens exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. You are our connection to this world, Vexia began. And we are drawn to you in ways we didn't anticipate, Nylara continued. On our world, such individual attraction is rare. Both of you? Elian asked, surprised. We experience it differently, Vexia explained. I am fascinated by your mind, your perspective, your way of understanding the universe. And I, Nylara said, her voice dropping lower, I'm drawn to your emotional depth, your capacity for passion beneath your scientific exterior. The room seemed charged with possibility. Elian looked between them. These extraordinary beings who had literally crossed the stars and upended his orderly life. In our culture, Vexia said carefully, there is no concept of exclusivity and connection. The idea that one must choose a single bond is foreign to us. That's not exactly how things typically work here, Elian managed, though his voice sounded strained even to his own ears. Perhaps, Nylara suggested, her fingers now gently tracing his jawline, we might create our own cultural understanding, something neither fully of Earth nor of Kepler. As her touch sent electricity through him and Vexia's intense gaze held his own, Elian realized he was standing at the threshold of something unprecedented, a connection that transcended not just cultural boundaries, but planetary ones. The scientist in him knew there were 1,000 complications to consider. The man in him was increasingly unable to deny what he was feeling for both of these extraordinary visitors. I think, he said carefully covering Nylara's hand with his own, that cultural exchange should be approached with an open mind. Vexia smiled, reaching for his other hand. Then let the exchange begin. Stellar complications. 6 weeks into their stay, life with Nylara and Vexia had developed into a strange but harmonious rhythm. By day, Elian worked at the university, occasionally bringing home equipment to satisfy the aliens' curiosity about Earth science. Evenings and weekends became explorations, both of his world and the deepening connections between them. What had begun as tentative cultural exchange had blossomed into something more profound. With Vexia, Elian shared long discussions about the nature of reality and consciousness, their minds meeting in ways that challenged and expanded his scientific understanding. With Nylara, he discovered passion he'd never known existed, her uninhibited approach to physical connection breaking down walls he hadn't realized he'd built. The complexity of maintaining relationships with both aliens simultaneously had resolved itself with surprising ease. Their cultural framework, free from Earth's expectations of exclusivity, allowed a fluidity that Elian found liberating. Together, they created their own small universe within his apartment walls, sheltered from the complications waiting outside. Until reality intruded one rainy Tuesday morning, Elian's phone rang as he was preparing to leave for work. Dr. Chen's name flashed on the screen. "Sophia, what's up?" he answered casually. "Elian." Her voice was tight with excitement. "You need to come in immediately. The long-range sensors picked up something extraordinary last night." His stomach dropped. "What kind of something?" "A signal pulse. From Kepler 186f. The exact frequency you were targeting in your transmission experiment." The phone nearly slipped from his suddenly damp palm. "That's impossible. The signal would take years to reach." "I know the math, Elian. That's why this is revolutionary. It suggests your quantum entanglement theory was correct. The department is buzzing. The dean wants to call a press conference." Across the room, both aliens were watching him intently, clearly picking up his distress. "Sophia, listen to me," he said urgently. "Don't do anything yet. Don't tell anyone else. I need to verify some calculations first." Too late. Half the astronomy department is already analyzing the data. This could be the breakthrough of the century. Proof of intelligent life and instantaneous interstellar communication in one discovery. After extracting a promise that she would at least delay any formal announcements until he arrived, Elian hung up and faced his alien companions. "Your people sent another signal," he said flatly. Vexia's expression tightened. "It must be the commune's scheduled check-in. We were supposed to activate our dampening field to mask it, but we were distracted," Nylara finished, looking genuinely contrite. "Distracted?" Elian ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "The entire scientific community is about to confirm the existence of alien intelligence and potentially track that signal right to this apartment." "Would that be so terrible?" Nylara asked softly. "Your people learning they're not alone in the universe?" "It's not that simple," he snapped, pacing the small living room. "You don't understand Earth politics, the military implications, the religious fallout. Some would welcome you, yes, but others." He couldn't finish the thought. Vexia approached, placing her hand gently on his arm. "Then we must leave." The simple statement hit Elian like a physical blow. Leave? But the celestial alignment— "There are emergency protocols," she explained. "Ways to return before the alignment, though not without risk." "What kind of risk?" he demanded. Nylara joined them, her usual confidence subdued. "The emergency transport draws power directly from our life force. It would significantly drain us, requiring extensive recovery time upon return. You could be hurt," Elian translated, his anger dissolving into concern. "It's our error that created this situation," Vexia said firmly. "We won't allow your world, or you, to bear the consequences." The thought of them leaving, especially under dangerous conditions, sent a wave of panic through Elian that surprised him with its intensity. In just 6 weeks, these extraordinary women had become essential to him. "There must be another way," he insisted, checking his watch. "I need to get to the university, contain this somehow. You two stay here and activate whatever dampening technology you have. Maybe we can convince them it was an equipment malfunction, a false reading." As he headed for the door, Nylara caught his arm, pulling him into a fierce embrace. "Be careful," she whispered against his ear. "Your world isn't ready for ours." At the university, chaos reigned. The astronomy department was crowded with faculty and graduate students, all clamoring around monitors displaying the signal data. Dr. Chen rushed to him the moment he entered. "Where have you been?" "The signal?" Repeated twice more. "This is definitive proof, Elian." He forced himself to appear calm as he reviewed the data. The signal was unmistakable. A clear response to his original transmission encoded in the same quantum pulse pattern he had designed. "It could still be an equipment malfunction," he suggested weakly. Dr. Winters, the department chair, scoffed. 3 identical pulses, perfectly matching your experimental parameters. The statistical probability of that being coincidental is astronomical. He clapped Elian on the shoulder. "You've made history, son. NASA and SETI are already being notified. The president may call." Elian's phone vibrated in his pocket. A text from Nylara. "Dampening field active, but previous signals can't be erased. Decision needed soon. As colleagues congratulated him and reporters began gathering outside the building, Elian felt trapped between worlds. The career-making discovery he had dreamed of for years was now his worst nightmare. Success meant losing Nylara and Vexia, either to a hasty, dangerous departure or to the inevitable government intervention once their presence was discovered. By the time he managed to extract himself from the university, claiming he needed air to process the momentous events, the story had already broken on national news. His phone showed missed calls from numbers he didn't recognize, likely journalists seeking comment. He found the aliens in his apartment, their few possessions packed in small iridescent bags that seemed larger inside than out. "You're really leaving," he said, the reality hitting him anew. "We must," Vexia replied gently. "The risk grows with every passing hour." Nylara approached, her eyes reflecting the same pain he felt. "Come with us." The words hung in the air between them. "What?" he breathed. "The emergency transport can accommodate a third," she explained, taking his hands. "It would be even more taxing on our systems, but possible. You want me to leave Earth? Everything I know?" Vexia joined them, completing their circle. "You would be the first human to see another world, to truly understand the cosmos you've dedicated your life to studying." The offer was staggering. Abandoning his life, his career, his species, to journey to a world 23 light-years away with two beings he'd known for mere weeks. Yet something inside him recognized the truth. His connection to them had become more real, more vital than anything tethering him to Earth. A sharp knock at the door shattered the moment. Through the peephole, Elian saw Dr. Chen and two men in dark suits. Time had run out. A decision was required. Now. "Celestial choices, Dr. Mercer? We know you're in there." Dr. Chen's voice was accompanied by another firmer knock. "These gentlemen are from the government. They need to discuss your discovery." Elian turned to the aliens, his heart pounding. "The back exit. Through the service stairs, now." They moved swiftly, grabbing their bags. Elian snatched his laptop, phone, and a small duffel he kept packed for occasional research trips. As they slipped out the back door, he heard his front door being opened. Apparently, the government gentleman hadn't waited for permission. The next hours passed in a blur of movement. Using back alleys and public transportation, changing directions frequently to avoid potential pursuit, Elian led them to a small observatory owned by an old college friend who was currently abroad. Located in the hills outside the city, it offered temporary sanctuary and, crucially, privacy. As night fell, they stood beneath the observatory's retractable roof, open to reveal a sky glittering with stars. The aliens had set up a complex arrangement of small crystalline devices that hummed with energy. "The transport field will be ready within the hour," Vexia informed him, making final adjustments. "We've sent the emergency recall signal to the commune." Elian nodded, still struggling with the magnitude of the choice before him. "If I stay, they will find you," Nylara said bluntly. "Question you. You would be forced to reveal our existence, our world. And if I go with you?" Vexia's expression softened. "We cannot promise what awaits. Our world is beautiful but utterly foreign to your biology. The commune would welcome you as the first human ambassador, but you would be as much a subject of study as a guest. You would never see Earth again," Nylara added gently. "The emergency transport is one way for beings of your composition. One way." The finality of it struck him like a physical blow. "Everything I've ever known. Balanced against everything you have yet to discover," Vexia completed his thought, her eyes reflecting starlight. Outside, distant lights appeared on the access road, vehicles approaching. Their sanctuary had been compromised. "How?" Elian whispered, moving to the window. "Your phone, perhaps. Or security cameras along our route," Nylara suggested, joining him at the window. "Earth's surveillance is quite thorough." The crystalline array pulsed more intensely, casting ethereal patterns across the observatory walls. "Transport field initializing," Vexia announced. "We have minutes, not hours." Elian looked between the approaching lights and the stars above, between the world he knew and the universe beckoning beyond, between two extraordinary women who had shown him possibilities he'd never imagined. "Elian," Nylara's voice was urgent as vehicle doors slammed outside. We must decide. In that moment, clarity washed over him. His entire life had been dedicated to reaching beyond Earth's boundaries, to connecting with the cosmos. He had sent a signal into the void seeking precisely this: contact, connection, understanding. "I'm coming with you," he said, the words bringing immediate certainty. This wasn't running away. It was running toward everything he had ever sought. The transport array reached full power as footsteps pounded on the stairs below. Vexia and Nylara positioned themselves on either side of Elian within the light pattern on the floor. "The process will be disorienting," Vexia warned as she took his left hand. "Focus on us. We will anchor you." Nylara took his right hand, completing the circuit. "Whatever happens, we face it together. 3 worlds converging." As the door burst open and suited figures rushed in, the crystalline array emitted a blinding pulse. Elian felt himself simultaneously compressed and expanded, his consciousness stretching across impossible distances, while his physical form seemed to fold into dimensions he couldn't comprehend. Through it all, he clung to the anchoring presence of Nylara and Vexia, their life forces entwined with his own. The last thing he saw of Earth was the astonished faces of the government agents, frozen in a moment of discovery that would forever remain incomplete. And then otherness. Stars viewed from angles impossible from Earth, light that moved differently, gravity that sang rather than pulled. And through his disorientation, the steady presence of his companions guiding him into their world, they materialized in what appeared to be a vast crystalline chamber, its architecture flowing in organic patterns that defied Euclidean geometry. Figures moved toward them, being similar to Nylara and Vexia but with subtle variations that hinted at the diversity of their species. Elian stood on shaking legs, overwhelmed by the alienness surrounding him, yet strangely unafraid. He had crossed 23 light years, becoming the first human to set foot on another world. The scientist in him exulted even as the man struggled to process the enormity of his choice. Nylara and Vexia swayed beside him, clearly weakened by the transport but still supporting him between them. The approaching being stopped at a respectful distance, communicating in melodic tones that somehow carried meaning to Elian, despite being unlike any language he'd heard. "They welcome you," Vexia translated unnecessarily as he had somehow understood. "The first bridge between worlds." "You will need time to adjust," Nylara added, her voice tired but warm. "As will we. The journey has taken much from us." Looking at their drained faces, Elian felt a surge of protective tenderness. "You risked everything for this. For me." "As did you," Vexia reminded him. A gentle chiming filled the chamber, music or language or perhaps both, as the gathered aliens continued their welcome. Elian recognized it as the beginning of something unprecedented. Not just his adaptation to a new world, but the first true exchange between 2 sentient species. That night, though night was a concept that worked differently on this world with its 3 small moons, Elian sat with Nylara and Vexia in the chamber provided for them. Through vast transparent walls, he watched the unfamiliar constellations of Kepler's sky, his mind still processing the journey. "Do you regret it?" Nylara asked softly, her hand finding his in the dim light. Elian considered the question seriously. He had left behind his career, his research, everyone he had ever known. Yet looking at these extraordinary beings beside him, one whose mind challenged and expanded his own, one whose passion had awakened parts of himself he never knew existed, he found his answer. "How can I regret following the stars?" he replied. "It's what I've always done, just never quite so literally." Vexia smiled, joining their hands with her own. "The commune believes that understanding grows from connection. Your presence here will change both our worlds forever." "And us," Nylara added, her eyes reflecting the alien starlight. "We are changed already." As they sat together beneath foreign stars, 3 beings from worlds that should never have met, Elian understood that some signals once sent into the void create connections that transcend distance, biology, and even the fabric of space itself. What had begun as a simple greeting across the stars had become an entirely new constellation of possibilities. Whatever challenges awaited him on this new world, he would face them with the dual light of knowledge and passion, embodied in the extraordinary companions who had brought him across the cosmos, not just to a new planet but to a new understanding of his place in the universe. The signal had been sent, the response had come, and the true journey was just beginning.